Let's head over to the MAC. It's funny because we're talking about UMass in the MAC. That's right. We're talking about Joe Harasymiak. Okay, formerly the defensive coordinator at Rutgers, gets hired to be the coach of the Minutemen. You know, he played at Springfield in Massachusetts. Right, he's from the East Coast. Okay, so he's pretty familiar with this geography. Right, he was the head coach at Maine for a number of years. This is a really interesting hire. He's another young guy. He does, though, for how young he is, he does have head coaching experience, right? Like at Maine. Okay. Very different than being a head coach at the FBS level, but he did a good job as the defensive coordinator at Rutgers. He did a good job, when he was at Minnesota. I mean, 2019, I can remember pretty good safety on the staff of Minnesota. And actually from 2019-21, when he was on that staff, I can remember the name of a couple good safeties, that he had to coach up to the NFL. So
And
this will
recruited
be
too,
really
by the
interesting.
way.
And
Tyler
recruited
Nubin.
Tyler Newton. So this is an interesting hire. I like it. I think it'll be difficult to calibrate what are the actual new expectations now that you're joining the MAC. So that's why it makes my grade a little bit tough, right? So you're going to be spending more money. Like your athletic department's going to be spending more money than most of these schools in the MAC. So in my opinion, the expectations should be pretty high for this UMass team, right? And the reality is, like, yeah, you're going to be spending a lot of money, right? Do you have the infrastructure, right? Do you have the geography? Do you have the resources? Did you get the right coach for all those things to come together and work? I don't know. That's the thing. So I am not as high on this hire. And I don't know. There aren't a ton of hires that would have made me super excited. I think um, Zach Kitley would have probably made me excited here. I mean, Harasymiak is a good coach, not necessarily an elite offensive mind, right? It'll be interesting. But again, they're going to be spending a lot of money here, right? Ryan Bamford, the athletic director there, he said that they're committed to ramping up their investment in football, and that's part of the reason why he was able to convince their board of regents, like their president, that hey, moving to the MAC is a good idea. Okay, if you look at uh, in terms of revenue spent on football, this past season, Toledo spent the highest in the MAC. They spent $11 million in the football program last year, which is awesome, by the way, for a G5 MAC team to be spending $11 million. UMass spent 11.22. So Toledo spent 11.28. UMass spent 11.22. So the expectation is that you are supposed to be the best, if not one of the best teams in the MAC. All right. That's the expectation. So it makes it tough for me to believe that Harasymiak is going to meet those expectations. However, I still think he's a good coach, and I do think it's not a bad hire at all.
Not at all. And you talk about investment, like the 1.3, 1.4 million annually would put them right at the top. If you took 2024 coaching salaries, right, that USA Today brings out, you look at the MAC, you got Chuck Martin, Jason Candle right there at the top there making 1.3, 1.2 respectively. So it's a big deal. It's a big deal where you're coming from. The irony is he's actually going to make less at UMass than he would staying at Rutgers. He was about to make $1.6 million to be the defense coordinator at Rutgers. We know Rutgers spends money to get their coaches. But the reality is he obviously wanted to be at UMass. He wanted to be a head coach. He loves the Northeast. He's from there. You said he's from New Jersey. He played football in the state of Massachusetts. He's coached at Maine. He coached at Rutgers, right? So he's Northeast, born and bred, obviously. And I think it's interesting. You talked about the investment. Not only
Fit
is he
matters.
fit matters. You talk about the investment. Not only is it 1.3, $1.4 million annually, his coaching salary pool, it's gonna be 2.7 million. We just talked about Charlotte's coaching pool and how there's 1.8 in the American Conference. You're gonna have a MAC team spending almost $1 million more than that. And his NIL money, I don't know how right they figured this out or what this actually means, but it's gonna be about $2 to $3 million per year, which is big time for the MAC, and it's exciting. Obviously, the Minutemen have not had success, and when I say not have success, I mean not made a bowl game, right? The past, right? So it's been bad. It's been really bad, right? Since 2012, they are most wins is 4-8, right? With Mark Whoopi, and then he got out of there, and Don Brown experiment didn't work, and it's been rough. been rough, but you got the 38-year-old coming in there trying to rejuvenate that program. And honestly, we talk about recalibrating expectations. Yes, right. Their expectation is to win more games, but you also like they went in right and they played like a semi half max schedule this past season. So you played Eastern Michigan, you played Toledo, you played Buffalo, you played Miami, Ohio, you played NIU, right? And the reality is, like, all those programs have like really freaking good coaches, like really good coaches. You talk about Chris Creighton at Eastern Michigan. We talked about
Pete
him.
Lembo.
Pete Lambeau at Buffalo. You got Jason Candle and what they do there at Toledo, Miami, Ohio. Chuck Martin, you got NIU and Thomas Hammock, what they did this season. So obviously, like, you look at that and like, okay, we just got boat raced by the MAC. But the reality is, like, those are some of the better teams in the MAC and the better programs in the MAC. And so you're going to have opportunities to play, some lower level programs in the MAC. And also you're going to get hopefully an upgrade in the coach and the coaching staff. Sounds like a more investment, obviously, in your coaching salary pool, also with your NIL. So obviously, like, just because you get paid more doesn't mean you can be better at it, but it's also exciting, for this UMass team and what they can do. I think Don Brown was making about $800K past season. So this is a big financial step up. And you talked about the importance of what they need to do going into the MAC and have success and success early, honestly, for the future of that program, for the future of that conference. So it's exciting, obviously. Exciting time to be a Minuteman. Harasymiak, I'm pretty familiar with him, what he did at Minnesota, what he did in the Big Ten. And that's a guy that I think Rutgers is pretty upset to lose, right? He's a guy that's really good defensive coordinator. He's was talked about at a lot of different spots, and he ended up taking the spot at UMass, and good for him. Good for him.
Yeah, and I will say the thing is, and this is why this theory isn't always perfectly solid. Like I know I talked about, like, I like offensive minded coaches in the G5, right? However, if you were to hire Mark Whipple after his stint at Pittsburgh, when he worked with Kenny Pickett, right, got him drafted in the first round, Jordan Addison, what he did with him, getting him, propelling him to USC, and then first round draft pick. If you had hired Mark Whipple after that, I would have been like, oh my god, I would have given that hire like a very good grade, probably a better grade than I would have given the one that I'm giving Harasymiak. But the reality sometimes it doesn't work out that way. Even if you have an offensive minded guy, now Mark Whipple is a little bit different. He's not like a super brain, offensive guy. He's just an offensive guy, right? But I don't know. There's a lot of different ways that this can work out or not work out. But like you said, I mean, they're investing more in their program. Harasymiak has more resources than anyone in the MAC. And I think a lot of people were confused by the move to the MAC. And while, yes, UMass has been in the MAC before, right? This isn't their first time in the MAC. I think it just still confused a lot of people because they thought that maybe that this brand, which has a pretty good brand for like several sports, women's basketball, they've had a good team, maybe not the last couple of years, but you still have a pretty decent brand here that maybe I think people thought, oh, well, if Charlotte's going to the American, like, then where's UMass going to end up, right? So maybe the MAC might have been a little bit disappointing for some fans, but uh, I do think that UMass can have a lot of success in the MAC, and they're expected to, right? Like we just said. So I guess I'll let you talk about their coaching staff before we give our final grades because we have been talking for a while about all these coaches.
Yeah, yeah. So the coaching staff they're bringing in, the offense coordinator is going to be Mike Bajakian. He coached quarterbacks at Utah this past season. He was the offense coordinator and quarterbacks coach from Northwestern from 2020 to 2023. If you remember that COVID season in 2020, Northwestern had a very successful season, right? They made the Big Ten championship game. He coached in the Northeast before. He was the OC at Boston College. Before that, it was one of the top rushing offenses in the ACC in the whole country, actually, in that season. So that's exciting. Also, to pair with, defensive coach, I think they like to see their offense coordinator running the football, playing complimentary football, and all that kind of stuff. Also, like learning from Greg Schiano and PJ Fleck. Like, that's what those guys do as head coaches. Before that, he was in the
Yeah.
NFL, but the reality is, like, it wasn't just running the football. In the NFL, he was with Jameis Winston in the Bucs, throwing the football over the yard. So I like to see that multiplicity in the offense, leaning into what you do well, and what the personnel kind of calls for. is awesome to see. The O-line coach, like I said, this continuity with the OC and O-line is just so important. Kurt Anderson is the guy. He was with Bajakian at Northwestern. He developed some really good offensive linemen there, right? Peter Skronsky going to the NFL. He was also at Arkansas developing really good offensive linemen there with Frank Ragnow and Dan Skipper. So good stuff there from that little duo, the OC and the O-line coach. Wide receiver coach will be Jordan Hogan. He was with the 49ers most recently. He's kind of worked all over in the NFL with the Cardinals, the Ravens, the Bills. He also did coach in college at Colgate, was wide receivers coach there a couple years ago back in 2022. The running back coach, Jeremy Larkin. He was at Youngstown State the past couple seasons. He was also a DB analyst at Notre Dame in 2022. We love the cross training. At least I love the cross training from my offensive position coaches. He also had crossover with Anderson and Bajakian at Northwestern in 2020 and 2022. Love that continuity there, especially with the running game with your O-line, your OC, and your running back coach. That's fantastic. Your tight end coach is going to be Matt Lehman, familiar with him. If you're a UMass fan, he has been there for 4 seasons. This will be his 5th. So the other coaching staff there we talked about, in a similar but opposite sense with Zach Kitley at FAU, at UMass. Now it's Harasymiak to be the defensive guy. So how important it is for him to nail the offensive coaching staff and have a really good offensive coaching staff. It's interesting. We'll see how it goes. The OC, I mean, Utah and Northwestern, like you think about them as high flying offenses, but you also in the MAC, you don't have to have these high flying offenses. There aren't high flying offenses, right? It's about skill. It's about running the football in November. So that's, I think, pretty solid intel. And I think philosophically from Harasymiak, I kind of like that.
Yeah, like you said, like playing complementary football from a roster perspective, you lose your leading rusher in Jalen John, right? They haven't gotten a running back in the transfer portal, so that leads me to believe that they like where they're at. I'm imagining that they're probably going to get someone in the spring portal in that regard because they're going to want to run the ball. It'll be interesting, at the quarterback position. You bring in a guy like Brandon Rose from Utah. I don't know what he's going to offer, right? So, but I guess we'll see. I don't know. Like you said, they have all kinds of offenses over there that they're going to run with their offense coordinator, but I guess, right, if they want to be successful at least in the first couple seasons, got to find a way to run the ball in the MAC. You really do. I think it's so important because taking care of the football is a luxury in the MAC. It is a luxury. So if you can do that, run the football, play good defense. We talked about offense being more important in the American. I think in the MAC, the importance is playing good special teams, taking care of the football, and playing good defense. You look at some of the winning teams these last couple of years, Ohio, Miami, Ohio, great defenses, and they took care of the football. That's valuable, and they also ran the ball well. All of those teams. So
Yeah.
I think there's just different play styles that you have to play to be successful in certain conferences. And honestly, Harasymiak kind of plays into that a little bit, at least in the way that he probably wants his team to play offensively.
Without a doubt, without a doubt. So defensively, his side of the ball, right? The defense coordinator will be Jared Keedy. He was with Harasymiak at Rutgers. He was the Nichols coach there for 2 years. He was also with him back at Maine as well. He was the special teams coordinator at Maine too. So love that kind of versatility there. Love that connection and familiarity. Obviously, Harasymiak will have a huge hand in scheming and play design and like game planning defensively, and obviously calling plays on the defense. But nice to see that connection there with the defense coordinator. The linebackers coach will be Garrett Gilliak. He graduated from Maine, right? But there's no actually crossover with Harasymiak. This was a while ago. He was with in New Hampshire the past 11 seasons, basically, right? So he was their assistant head coach and defense coordinator for some of those. The D-line coach is going to be Naeem Wortman White. He's very familiar with the MAC, was at Akron for a couple years with their defensive line and outside linebackers. And he was also that crossover with Gilliak as New Hampshire with the defensive line coach there. So like that continuity on the defensive side of the ball. Special teams coordinator will be Joe Castellito. I'm sorry. He joined UMass back, or he joined him with Harasymiak He was the past 2 seasons was with Dartmouth as their special teams coordinator and Nichols coach. He's super young. He's like around 30 years old. He just graduated college in 2017, so that's kind of fun to see that. Harasymiak is also pretty young, so you got that, young energy there, revitalizing that program up in Massachusetts. So a lot of fun stuff, honestly, for this coaching staff. They had a big salary to work with. That's only 8 to 9 coaches, right? So they got room for a couple more. We'll see what they do with those. You're still having dominoes fall across college football with the NFL, getting into their hiring cycle. The New Orleans Saints are about to make another hire, to hire Kellen Moore. So there will be repercussions from that. There will be downfalls. So you will see this coaching cycle keep shuffling and stuff like that. So we'll see what Massachusetts continues to do and choose to fill out their coaching staff. But all in all, right now, I don't hate it at all. I don't hate it at all. Obviously, a lot on paper. We can speculate this, and that, but the overall protocol and the way they went about it, I think, is pretty solid and sound advice. Procedure.
In terms of a grade, we talked about now that you've joined the MAC, there are a lot greater expectations, right? I gave this a B minus, right? B meeting expectations, right? A's exceeding, C's not meeting expectations. I'm gonna give it a B minus. I think he can win games there, right? But to meet expectations at UMass here, given what you're spending, to me, you have to win conference championships. Is Harasymiak going to do that?
Whoa.
What do you mean, whoa? If you're going to spend $2.7 million on your infrastructure, surrounding your infrastructure, on your coaching staff, $1.3 and $1.4 million on your head coach, that needs to translate to wins. That has to. There's no reason why it should not. Because Kent State's not going to get there, Eastern Michigan's not going to get there. Hell, Ohio just won a conference championship, and they spend a fraction of that. A fraction.
I guess you're right. I just staring at their records. I'm staring at their previous records, and I'm like,
you're right.
I cannot.
You're right about that.
The expectation.
You're right about that.
I think he keeps his job, at least in the beginning, if he is making bowl games right early on.
100%.
But the expectation, I think,
by the time he leaves, if he doesn't,
I guess we do talk about that being, I'm sorry, not to interrupt you. We do talk about that being two separate things. The expectation and keeping your job are different things, right? So keeping your job.
It depends on the program.
Wow.
Right?
Yes. I guess you're right.
Maybe you and I have different expectations, and that's fine.
It's fine, yeah.
And that's going to mean that you just have a higher grade. That's fine.
I think we both like him. We both liked him where he was at Rutgers.
B minus is not a bad grade,
without doubt. And by the way, like, if the expectation is winning MAC championships, right, and he is a little bit underperforming that, I think you take that all day if you're a UMass fan, as we stand right now, right? I do think if you're an administration in there, if you're a booster, if you're writing these checks, and they're falling short of that, I think it could be, it could be frustrating. I will say, I think the expectations are a little bit lower, especially early on. This program is not in good shape, right? They're spending money, which is awesome. That's step one, right? Or a step, right? In one of the foundations of building a program. But I will go B plus, because when I say my expectation is for them, or my expectation would be for Harasymiak to start competing for bowl games, to start making bowl games, and not be a bottom feeder in the MAC. Have those schedules where sometimes if you're an independent, you either have really easy schedules or you have really tough schedules sometimes. And the way theirs fell this year, it ended up being pretty tough, and you won 2 games, right? So
if they were still independent, like my expectation, like my grade probably changes, because the expectation's like, can we win 5 games, which we haven't done in 15 years? It's like my expectation changes, right? But because you're in the MAC and you are spending significantly more money than everyone else, right? And you are a Power 5 DC coming in, my expectations are high. That's all I'm saying. And it's okay. And you know what? A bowl game, maybe the fans' expectations aren't that high. Maybe the fans are like you, and the fans are like, well, if we make bowl games, we're happy. And then, like you said, maybe he just keeps his job. If the fans are happy and boosters are okay with seeing him in bowl games, then that's fine. I just think if you're spending that money, you should be competing for conference championships. And if he's there for 7-8 years and he's never even made a conference championship, that's a huge that to me is not meeting expectations.
That would be a disappointment. I would be surprised if he was there that long and they were spending the way they were spending. I would assume, yeah, that would be a disappointment.